Hey guys, BuildZoid here, and welcome to the weekly HWbot score roundup number 6. There's been epic scores posted to HWbot last week, as there are basically every week. So we're going to be taking a look at quite a lot of them. I do like this new format. It makes it so much easier for me to actually choose scores, because I don't have to think about it so much. It's just like, I click on a score, I go, whoa, that's cool, added to the list. And then we end up with a list that's very long. But anyway, let's get right into it. Starting off with Splav's HWbot X265 4K like 4K record for 12-core CPUs. HWbot X265 is a video encoding benchmark. It's multi-threaded. It's very heavy. I believe it uses AVX. And it requires a pretty high level of stability, because you can have a benchmark that pulls a lot of power, but it'll just kind of run anyway, even if your settings are even if your settings are not super stable. And you can also have benchmarks which don't run a lot of power, but do complain about a lot of instability. And then you have things like X265, which pulls a lot of power and complains about instability a lot. So anyway, Splave pushed the 5900X all the way to 6.05 gigahertz. On the ASRock X570 Aqua motherboard with 4 sticks of Samsung B die, so that's running dual rank on the memory. As you can see, 32 gigs of RAM at 3800, 14, 14, 14, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of like HWbot X265 actually requires some level of stability. Because you like in dual rank on Ryzen, it is technically possible to do 4000 CL12. It's just not going to finish X265, so you can't do that. Other than that, because this is on LN2, I think the new CPU-Z version actually reads out the Infinity Fabric clock. Because that looks like 2-to-1 mode right there. And the thing is, on LN2, the Infinity Fabric just doesn't it's not very happy about being cold. So you end up with the Infinity Fabric not going full speed. So not really that, the memory settings here are kind of you could run that daily. But the thing is, on Liquid Nitrogen, the memory controller and Infinity Fabric behavior on Ryzen is very different from what you'd be used to at ambient, and so it gets actually very difficult to even run things like this. And then also X265 just makes it so that you really don't want to be running you want memory settings that are actually stable. You can't get away with the kinds of things you can get away with for, say, Cinebench, which also just doesn't even care that much about memory performance in the first place. But anyway, so really awesome score from Splave here. Let's move on to the next one. So the next score we've got is OGS's SuperPi 32 million score. So SuperPi 32 million is a single core benchmark. It's a very long, well, it used to be really long. Now it's under 4 minutes, and I consider it a reasonably reasonable length benchmark. But there's, it used to take over 4 minutes, and that wasn't okay with me. But anyway, now it's under 4 minutes. 11900K, so kind of arguably a long single-threaded CPU benchmark. Loves memory performance, and more specifically memory latency. There's some benchmarks that love memory bandwidth, and then there's SuperPi, which loves latency. So super low, the goal here is to run really low memory latency settings. It also loves CPU frequency, because it's a single-core benchmark. Of course it loves CPU frequency. And so OGS, they're a 2-person overclocking team. So they've pushed the 11.9, and I don't know if it was both of them for this score or just one of them, but either way, they've pushed the 11900 KF to just over 7 gigahertz at 7.043, using a Maximus 13 Apex. They're supported by Asus as well as a couple other manufacturers as well. Let's check out the settings, because this is always interesting to see. So yeah, we've got 4200 CL12, so we're back to Z270 style memory settings, because for SuperPi, as I mentioned, it loves memory latency more than raw bandwidth. And so you want to run it in 1-to-1, so you want to run it in gear 1 instead of gear 2. because Gear 1 has better latency than Gear 2. So Gear 1, 4200 CL, 12, 12, 12, TRAS of 20, which this is like the big difference to all the like past mainstream Intel platforms is you can actually set TRAS below 28 now, which is just cool to see. TRFC of 180 is just like super tight timings. Really, like this is around like this is basically within the the limits of what you can do in terms of DDR4 at CL12. And yeah, the CPU is at 7.043 gigahertz, Uncore at 6.33 gigahertz, and that puts OGS in third place for the SuperPi 32 million ranking. And they're recyc. I feel like I've seen this picture before. There's a decent chance that's that's actually the case. I was kind of wondering if they had the memory on liquid. Oh no, for 4200 CL12, you shouldn't need to do that. Like with strong memory sticks, that's the kind of like that is doable at ambient. You do need strong memory sticks though. Most kits, yeah, I'd say the vast majority of kits will top out somewhere between like 4000 CL12 and 4100 CL12, and that's on like newer kits. In the past, it used to be that like well, on Z270 it was like if you had a 4000 CL12 capable kit, that was pretty good. Um, but yeah. Anyway, awesome score from OGS, so congratulations to them on the third place. And let's move on to the next score, which is another category record from Splave, this time in Cinebench R20 on 18 core CPUs. So we're looking at a 10980XE on the ASRock X299 OC formula, because Splave is supported by ASRock, which I'm not sure if I mentioned that when we were looking at his first score, but yeah, he's supported by ASRock. Anyway, CPU doing almost 5.9 gigahertz, memory doing 3800, 12, 11, 11, 24, 240. So Encore, actually that's a really high Encore, almost 4 gigahertz Encore frequency. So yeah, memory really pushing the limits of what is doable on X299, because the X299 memory control, it's an interesting memory controller. It has less issues running 1T command rate than mainstream Intel. But on the flip side, it also doesn't clock anywhere near as high, even if you're in 2T command rate, which makes it kind of interesting. So, yeah, most of the time, you're not really gonna see X299 CPUs, especially on liquid or nitrogen, running much more than 3800 CL12 or approaching 4000 CL12, because also the memory controller actually doesn't really like being cold. So a lot of if you take ambient settings on X299 and try to run them on LN2, you may find that they don't work anymore. So also an interesting interesting platform, and yeah, just a massive Cinebench R20 score here on the 18 core CPU, and this also is just these chips also pull an absolutely stupid amount of power, especially on LN2, and they have a cold bug, so they're really hard to run because you have to hold the temperature very stable, and the CPU is burning well in excess of 600 watts. Honestly, even approaching 1,000 watts. Well, depending on the benchmark, I think there's been some chips that have been seen going over that. But yeah, and the reason for that is very simple. The X299 CPUs have a fully integrated voltage regulator, and the not fully integrated voltage regulator. They have an integrated voltage regulator. And the thing is, that thing just doesn't work below minus 110 degrees Celsius. It'll also depend on the CPU. Some will have IVRs that work down to lower temperatures than others, but most of the time you're going to be stuck at around minus 110, and that just makes it all the more difficult because you need to not only do you need to cool a stupid amount of heat, you need to actually control the temperature when doing that. Which for a lot, there's a lot of CPUs where you can just sort of fill up the LN2 pot and call it a day and then, spend all your time tweaking. X299, no, you really, really can't do that. So yeah, this is a really, it's a platform I'm a big fan of, even though these days it's kind of made irrelevant by, the 5950X. and I guess Threadripper, depending on what kind of usage scenario you're looking at. Anyway, so Splave actually posted this 18-core record as a response to Sen's Cinebench R20 score on the 10980XE. So anyway, congrats to Splave on retaking first place, because for I think like a day, Sen's actually had the first place for the 18-core Cinebench R20 category. Unfortunately, yeah, Splave beat him and took first place back. But anyway, so Sens here was running on an X299 Dark, so EVGA board, Samsung B-die memory again, single rank on X299. There's really, well, dual rank is actually doesn't work that great. Yeah, X299 is weird. But anyway, so here we're looking at 5.85 gigahertz on the CPU, so very similar frequency to what Splave was pushing, but the thing is, this is Cinebench, and Cinebench prioritizes CPU frequency basically above everything else. So even though Sens is running like 4000, 12, 12, 12, 28, 1T, and like the thing is, like he's like 100 megahertz down on Encore clock, which that's the memory controller to cores interconnect. You can sort of think of it like it's basically ring clock, except it's mesh. And yeah, and then 5.85 on the CPU. So that you know, Sen's got to first place for Cinebench R20 for, I want to say, a day, but I'm not entirely sure. I wasn't paying that much attention. Well, actually, we can just look at when the scores were posted, right? Oh yeah, a day. I'm right. 8th June, 7th June. So anyway, congratulations to Sens on the used to be first place 18 core score. Because like 109, like the X299 chips are really hard to run. So, you know, being anywhere in the, like, running these kinds of clocks, and like, it's also Cinebench is just insanely power hungry. One of the hottest benchmarks on HWbot. So yeah, just congratulations to Sens on managing to get first place for a day, and the now second place score that he got from that 10980XE. And then and yeah, so congrats to him on that. And let's move on to another score from Sens, which is his Geekbench 3 multi-core score with the 10980XE, this time at 5.876 megahertz, because Geekbench 3 is also a multi-core benchmark, but the interesting thing about Geekbench 3 is that the multi-core load is very short. It is very heavy. It'll actually potentially peak, the peak power draw for it can actually sometimes exceed what Cinebench does, but it doesn't run it anywhere near as long as Cinebench runs. And so in terms of like the temperature-wise, it's easier to deal with Geekbench than it is to deal with Cinebench, because Cinebench takes longer to run an all-core workload than the all-core portion of Geekbench takes. Anyway, so CPU up at 5.8, like almost 5.88. Whoa, really pushing the memory speed now. That's another. Oh no, that almost looks like the BCLK might be floating around. Oh no, that's higher BCLK. Yeah, but really pushing the memory speed. So that's what, like 40, 50, 12, 12, 12, 28. You can run lower TRAS than that, I think. Yeah, no, you definitely can. Like, this is X299. It doesn't have the same limitations as like mainstream Intel. So you can technically run like TRAS 20 or something, or like whatever gives you best performance. Also, I'm surprised the TRFC isn't lower. It wouldn't really it probably wouldn't make that too much of a difference, but still a very, very solid score from Sens here, right? 5th place, but massive memory score, and then just pushing a 10980XE to, you know, over 5 like almost 5.9 gigahertz. Like it's just never easy. As I mentioned, like these are real, like cold bug, massive power consumption, kind of temperamental memory controller. This is a really sort of difficult platform to run Sub-Zero. Out of the more modern platforms, this is one of the harder ones to deal with. Because you can't just like there's others where, you know, the memory tuning takes a lot of effort, but it's like a lot of those also just run full pot, so you don't really have to worry about the temperature too much as long as like your thermal paste is holding up. So anyway, and yeah, he has the CPU lapped. Did a good job on that. Very even thermal paste spread. or more like CPU and LN2 pot so flat there's no space for the thermal paste to be in, which that's what you're aiming for, right? Like, so yeah, good, like very very nice slapping job right there, and then yeah, that's the system. Kind of minimalist on the insulation in my opinion. Though I guess X299 the memory isn't as at risk of getting cold as on some other platforms, because again you're just not going to be taking the CPU that cold because cold bug. So anyway, let's move on to the next score. Zarok 77's Cinebench R20, sixth place for quad core CPU category, and first place for the 3300X. Running on a Crosshair 8 Dark Hero. And yeah, this is a 3300X at 5.7 gigahertz with 1.75 volts. Memory running 3200 CL14. The thing is, this is Cinebench. It doesn't care about memory speed, like almost at all. And yeah, so like this especially on Ryzen, like on Intel with Intel, the memory still affects Cinebench kind of like a measurable amount. With Ryzen, it's more like you just kind of have to rerun the benchmark over and over again, and your memory settings are borderline irrelevant. So yeah, it makes sense that he's just kind of running like that's actually worse than what you would get on like some XMPs, because that's 14, 14, 15. That's not even just straight 14s. Like there's a 15 in there for some reason. Um, but yeah, still a very, very fast quad core seat, like, just in the quad core category, a very, very fast score. Which is cool to see, because the quad core category, like, we've not had new CPUs in the quad. Well, there's the 5300G, which is sort of the new interesting quad core CPU, and then there's the 3300X, which is like, it would be interesting if AMD actually decided to like produce any of them. Those chips are super hard to find, and there's my score. I need to redo that. I need to rerun that so that it sucks less, because I'm at 6.8 and I'm not in freaking Cinebench. I'm losing by 100. I'm losing by over 100 points. Yeah, that is not okay. I need to fix that score someday. Anyway, yeah. So congratulations to Zarok77 on pushing that 3300X to 5.7 gigahertz. And let's move on to the next score, which is Phantom Olo Low. Cinebench R20, 40 core actually, is it 40 core? I think it's 40 core. Yes. Yeah, 40 core category. Very weird category, right? But I think it's cool, because that's where we get to see weird hardware like the Xeon Gold 62R42R. Apparently doing 4.1 gigahertz. And this really looks like he just, like, straight up just using a server to do this. I think, is he the only one to run one of these? No, he isn't. So, yeah, there actually is some competition. It's not just like winning by being the only person to have the hardware. Does he have some kind of power limit thing? I have no idea what you would do with these like dual, because like, so the cool thing is this is actually two CPUs. So this is a dual CPU like server platform that he's benching here. And so it's like, can you like raise the power limit or something? Because max core frequency. Oh, I guess Benchmate just picked up on the peak frequency when the test was like starting. But still, just a cool score, because it's like, oh, server hardware, like two dual CPU, 40 core. Like I don't know that this category will be anything other than server CPUs, because because we already have like 32 core Threadrippers, and then we have 64 core Threadrippers. So I guess maybe Intel could release a 40 core unlocked CPU someday. Oh yeah, for now and probably the near future, this is like this specific category is like restricted to just server CPUs and dual socket platforms at that, I think. Because yeah, 40 cores on one CPU is just kind of weird. Right? Like 32 make, well, the thing is, I think Intel's like high core count dies are often like kind of weird numbers, so maybe 40 would work. Maybe like a 6x7 arrangement where 2 tiles would be not used or just disabled. You could have a 40 core CPU like that. Would be huge though. So anyway, just an interesting just an interesting score right here. Not that I know much, like I really, like this really does look like it's just running at stock, and then most of it'll come down to, I guess, like you want to rerun Cinebench. Like Cinebench is unfortunately one of those benchmarks where a lot of the time the score will go up if you just run it over and over again. And then of course you need to. I suspect this is just vanilla Windows 10, just judging by the desktop background, but there might be some further tweaks on it. But yeah, anyway, solid score, interesting score. Congratulations to Phantom on the 40 core CPU, 40 CPU core Cinebench R20 record. Because it's not a 40 core CPU, it's a 40 CPU cores, which you get with 2 Xeons. So yeah, interesting score. Congratulations to him on that. And let's move on to the next score, which is Surgman's Cinebench R20 10-core CPU, 5th place, with the Core i9-10900K at 6.85 gigahertz on a Gigabyte Z590 Aorus Tachyon. Yeah, here's the setup. It's upside down. I'm actually finding that really upsetting for some. Yep, that's pretty upsetting to look at, unfortunately. Minus 193 on the on the LN2 pot, which makes sense because that's about as low as you can get with LN2. And then in terms of memory settings, just 4800 CL14, which. Yeah, because like the reason Cinebench on Ryzen CPUs doesn't care about memory basically at all is because Ryzen CPUs have so much L3 cache, but Intel chips don't have a lot of L3 cache, and 11th gen has, if I'm not mistaken, less L3 cache than 10th gen did. Oh wait, no, this is a 10th gen CPU. Oh man, Z590 Tachyon, I just got totally like confused. I was like, wait. Yeah, 10900K, but the thing is, like, still per core, like these still have way less L3 than what you would find on an AMD CPU. So these are a lot more dependent on the memory. And I guess so these do like benefit from memory settings a lot more than AMD chips do. So 4800, 14, 14, 13, 28, 2T command rate. And yeah, like this is, I actually really want to run the 10900K on my Z590 Tachyon when I next get LN2. So it's cool to see that, like, yeah, this works well. So, though I don't think my 10900K is coming anywhere near this score. My chip doesn't do 6.8 gigahertz for Cinebench, like, at all. Or who knows, maybe with the Tachyon it does, but I really doubt it. So, yeah, still cool score from Surgman. Congratulations to him on the 5th place in the 10-core CPU category. And let's move on to into the sort of like hardware scores. So this is going to be like per like specific hardware categories. And the first, so like specific CPU specific. So instead of like Cinebench on a 10-core CPU, we're looking at Cinebench on specifically, well, in this case, we're looking at PieFast, specifically on the Phenom 2 X2 555 Black Edition. Now, PieFast is an old benchmark that I don't know anything about, which is weird because it's a short benchmark, like very short. It runs in 16 seconds and 200 milliseconds on a Phenom 2. Those are old and kind of slow. But, PieFast still finishes in 16 seconds. So I'm surprised that I've not run this. I suspect it's because it's one of those old benchmarks that also like requires. Well, of course it requires Windows XP. But the thing I'm wondering about is like, is this one of those that also needs to like a bunch of weird stuff done in order to be faster? Yeah, I don't know. I guess I should check this benchmark out. Oh, wait a minute. I think I know why. It doesn't get global points. Yeah, that's probably it. It only gets hardware points. That's probably why I've never run it. Anyway, so yeah, Unity of Saints here pushed a Phenom 2 X2 555 Black Edition to 6.75 gigahertz on a Gigabyte 890FX UD7, along with some Corsair Dominator, what I'm gonna assume is Elpida hyper memory. Yeah, that's Elpida hyper. That's DDR3 1800 66618 SLP hyper, 1T command rate, 4.86 gigahertz on the North Bridge, over 6.7 gigahertz on the core. That this chip's absolutely flying, and I love Phenom 2s. Actually, I just love the entire AM3 and AM3 Plus platform and Phenom 2s and FX chips and like all these CPUs because they are so well. Phenom 2s are actually kind of fiddlier to run on, are actually kind of fiddly to run on LN2 depending on which specific chips you have. A lot of them are very the memory controller almost universally doesn't do quite the same settings that it does at ambient on LN2, but there's no weird cold, like as long as you don't get like a C0 stepping, I think it is. There's no weird cold bugs or anything or C2 stepping. There's like some steppings that basically don't work properly on liquid nitrogen, but the later production CPUs, they're great. You do not have to like worry about them at all. They just run. And so it's super easy to just like sit there, keep the LN2 pot filled up and mess around with settings and really get your really get a score dialed in. And yeah, and Unity, so this is just fastest ever PyFast run on a Phenom 2 X2 555 Black Edition. Unity apparently went on a large session of benching AM3. And I didn't include all of the scores he posted because there was a lot of them. So the other score that I decided to include is his SuperPi 32 million score on the Phenom 2X4 960T Black Edition at just under 6.5 gigahertz. Yeah, 2 cores, 2 threads, single-threaded benchmark. Actually, PyFast is also single-threaded, just by the way, 2 cores, 2 threads. This is almost certainly the same OS. Also, 890FX UD7 motherboard again, because it's like if you have the cool thing about some of these older platforms is if you have one good motherboard, you can run so many different CPUs through it, because each CPU has its own category that it belongs in, and so yeah, if you have one motherboard which you really like using, you just have an excuse to run it on LN2 way more often with way more different CPUs. Which with modern platforms you don't really you don't really have that because it's just you have for say Z490 you had the 10900K, the 10700K, the 10600K at 3 chips on there's more Phenom 2 X2s than there are unlocked K SKUs for Z490. So, yeah, and that's another reason why I just think AM3 and AM3 Plus is just awesome. And then also you have the same thing happening with LGA 1366 where everything is overclockable using the BCLK, and 775 where everything is overclockable using the FSB. The thing I also like about AM3 is that it just doesn't complain. As long as you have the correct CPUs, it doesn't complain about the cold, which a lot of other CPUs do. So, yeah, this time we're looking at slightly better memory settings, slightly more memory frequency, lower Northbridge clock though, and then lower core clock, which I guess this chip's just worse. Which kind of makes I believe the 960T were binning rejects for the 6-core chips. I'm not entirely sure. Well, the dual core chips were binning rejects for the quad cores, so these if anything these should be worse. Wait a minute, no they're not. I think these actually had a separate die. I can't remember now. But anyway, still the fastest 960T to ever run SuperPi 32 million. So congratulations to Unity of Saints on managing that score. And I think the previous record is quite old, right? Oh, no, not that old. I think there was one of these scores that he posted was, however, well, this one's from so his PyFast beat a record from 2010. And I think it was this score where he beat a Is this one really old? Oh no, it must have been one of the scores I didn't include. Oh, I should have included that one. Oh no, this is from 2011 as well. So yeah, this time Phenom 2 X4 980 Black Edition, Super Pi 32 million, 6.757 gigahertz. Uh, yeah, just another like the thing is like you can run like especially with what he's doing right here, you can just sort of reuse the same settings, right? Memory running almost like slightly lower memory frequency because that's just silicon variance right there, I'm guessing, or a matter of dialing in the core clock to the maximum and uncore clock because you kind of like core clock and uncore clock take priority over memory clock, I think, for Super Pi 32 million. Not entirely sure. Not a benchmark I bench that much. Because on Phenom 2s, it takes 10 freaking minutes, and I'm just not patient enough to run that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, so like very impressive set of scores from Unity of Saints. I maybe I should have included all of them, and we could have just like flicked through them, go like, because he really did post a bunch of just top scores for a bunch of different like old AMD Phenom 2 CPUs recently. All of them on that 890FX A UD7 motherboard. So the board's evidently like great because he's just beating ancient records left, right, and center at this point on the Phenom 2 chip. So yeah, very impressive scores from him. Um, should we? Let's check him out. Like since I've been teasing them, let's actually take a look at what he posted. So yeah, so we have 720 Black Edition. I think that's a first place. I'm pretty sure that's a first place. Yeah, first place. Um, that's another first place, isn't it? Yep, first place. 1100T. Fourth. Okay, didn't quite manage that one. Oh no. Uh, CPU frequency 10th. Okay, so that chip just doesn't seem to be that as strong as some of the other ones he's found. So there we have the 960T, 960T. Whoa, yeah, like he posted a bunch of scores with that chip, or it might be several chips. Then we have the 980 Black Edition. Then we have the 555 Black Edition, 560 Black Edition. Oh, this one, wait. Oh, yeah, this one just missed it on the getting into the roundup, I guess. More 560 Black Edition. So, yeah, he's been on an absolute rampage, just posting massive scores for Phenom 2s. So, yeah, congrats to him on all of those, because, like, like the how old how long a record has been standing is somewhat an indicator of how hard it is to beat, right? So yeah, congrats to him on all of those scores, and just like like amazing to see so many old chips like benched to such a level. So anyway, let's move on to the next score, which is Bones's Super Pi 32 million, which this he posted this, and then I think Unity beat him with, yeah, like actually we can just pull up Unity's score. Day later or 2 days later, something like that. 11th, 10th, day later. Yeah, it's been a week of short-lived first places. Right? Sens had first place Cinebench R20 for a day. And Bones had first place Super Pi 32 million for the 720 Black Edition for a day. But still, like, the second place is, like, that's still a top score. Like, that's still way up there. And 720 Black Editions are awful as far as I'm concerned. Like, all the other Phenom 2s, like 900 series, 500 series, 1000 series, great chips. Amazing chips. 720 Black Editions come in one stepping, and that's the C2 stepping. And this stepping does not work properly on liquid nitrogen, at least not in my experience. So yeah, like the memory controller is weaker, so this is 836777. I actually wonder what Unity was running, because Unity's running slightly less core frequency, but the thing is, this is Super Pi, so yeah, you can win on memory settings. Yeah, but 73666, yeah. That's the thing. Like 720 is just like memory controller is you can see it in the Encore clock as well. Like that's 3.5 gigahertz Encore, and what is this one? 3.5 gigahertz Encore. Like yeah, this is on a Sabertooth 990 FX board, so some variety. But that's the other nice thing is like you have so much. Well, you have debatable amounts of variety of 990 FX boards because a lot of 990 like well you have like 890 FX boards that you can use for Phenom 2s, and you can also use 990 FX boards, some 970 boards. The issue with AM3 and AM3 Plus board, especially the AM3 Plus boards, is a lot of them are garbage. The Sabertooth is not one of them, and that is the Sabertooth R3.0. That is a cool motherboard. Um, oh man, yeah, that. Oh yeah, that is a really cool motherboard. One of the last 990 FX motherboards to get released. Um, and yeah, it's cool to see that motherboard on LN2. I think Bones must be one of the first people to run one of these. Because this is not a very, like, this is kind of a rare board. Or at least I've not seen it very often. Like here in the UK, this R2 is super common. The R3.0, rare. And also, unfortunately, for some reason, ridiculously expensive. It's like, it's an AM3 Plus board. I don't care how rare it is. It can't run anything better than an FX 9590. And that's not great. um, but anyway, still a very, like, you know, still an impressive score. And yeah, 77721 on the memory. I'm guessing also LPW hypers. I'm not sure. I like with the Dominators, it's kind of obvious that they're going to be Alpida hypers, but with these, I am really not sure what those are. Probably hypers. I'm pretty sure those are hypers. The thing is with the low end, like with the Phenom 2 X3 720, it's kind of hard to tell because it might just be the memory controller of the CPU limiting the memory overclock there. Also interesting to see a Windows XP theme that isn't the olive green theme. But yeah, so congrats to Bones on the second place on the 720 Black Edition, because these chips are annoying to run. Like I'm surprised that like there's so much competition on these, because man, like I have one of them. I have never regretted running a CPU on LN2 more than that one 720 Black Edition. That was awful. And here people are pushing 6 gigahertz on these things, and I think I couldn't get over 5.5, and I wasn't even running like a benchmark. That was just like I couldn't get over 5.5. It was like, yeah. Anyway, so awesome scores. So awesome, like yeah, awesome score from Bones here. Congrats to him on that. And let's move on to the next score, which is Salty Croissants. 3D Mark Vantage performance on the Radeon HD 485X2. I love multi-GPU, and this is a 485X2, so this is like weird multi-GPU, because it's not a 4870X2, which makes it somewhat more rare. I think the 485X2 is a like Sapphire exclusive, maybe also some other like AMD-only board partners did them as well, like Power Color, actually probably just Power Color, because Power Color are kind of the brand to do weird dual GPU cards. Well, Sapphire kind of used to do them, I guess. Yeah, Sapphire kind of used to do them, but Power Color like kept on doing them even like R9 390X2, right? Whereas Sapphire didn't really do anything. Like they just kind of did a regular 7970 and regular 7990 and a regular 295X2. They didn't do anything super weird and out there with those. Whereas Power Color, like I think there's like a 6870X2 from Power Color, but anyway, 485X2, it's not a 4870X2, which makes it weird and cool, and it's got 2 cores. And the thing I really find just so like bizarre about these cards is that you've got these 2 GPU cores, and this is the V-Core VRM is entirely all the way like over here. That's all of the V-Core. There's no on modern dual dual core cards. You have a VRM for each core, and usually that VRM is right down the center of the card so that you don't have a bunch of power loss through the PCB. But 485X2s and 4870X2s, I guess they didn't pull enough power to justify doing that, or the manufacturers just didn't care. I don't know. I've yet to run, like I have multiple 4870X2s and I've just not done much with them. I need to get around to that. But that's part of the idea behind this series is like motivation for like me to get to bench more because it's like seeing scores like this is awesome. And yeah, water cooling on this, is it chilled? Oh yeah, that's chilled. You see paper towels on a water cooling setup, they're either leak testing or they're chilled. And this is HWbot, so it's chilled. um, anyway, we've got some vault mods on this. Yeah, it looks like just... Oh, wait, are those not... Oh, I guess it doesn't use Volterra, right? Because it's like a custom Sapphire thing. Because yeah, the AMD reference design actually uses Volterra VRMs, which are like super weird. Whereas this is more like, I mean, this is still a very weird card, but like this is a more conventional VRM design than the Volterra stuff, where you don't like a lot of the Volterra VRMs, like you don't have bulk capacitors, you only have ceramics. Um, yeah, cool to see this card, pushed, and 5900X for that massive CPU score. Though with a GPU that's only putting out 18,000 points, that actually doesn't help you that much. If the GPU was pushing like 30,000 points, then this would actually kind of matter. But with 18,000 points, yeah, it's not that big a deal. Um, but yeah, it's just cool to see, chilled water cooling. Um, I don't know what the stock voltage is on these, so while this might like that sounds really high for like modern GPUs, but these things are old, right? Like this is as old as I'm willing to go with GPUs, is like 4000 series. Anything older than that, and I just ignore it. Um, so wait, this is an Asus card? I was like I automatically went, oh, blue PCB. It must be no. It says Sapphire in the freaking. Is he being? Um, trying to. There's no branding anywhere. Wait, normally they have a little Sapphire logo on. Ah, no, it's a Sapphire card. Okay, man, I was so worried I got that wrong. Like I should not get that wrong. Anyway, yeah, push the card to 950 megahertz on the core, 1125 on the memory. The 5950X is absolutely, well, for water cooling, yeah, absolutely flying at 4.8 gigahertz core, 3800, 14, 14, 14, 26 on the memory, so like daily memory settings, but it is dual rank, so, that helps. And the thing is, Vantage has a CPU test, but as I mentioned, like the CPU test doesn't really matter for the GPU score here that much, like for the overall score here that much, because the GPU is just so damn slow. And also, the CPU test in Vantage isn't that memory sensitive. There's other benchmarks like 3D Mark 11, which actually cares quite a bit for the CPU test. And Time Spy also likes memory performance, but Vantage not really one of them. Like it'll still benefit, but not as much. Anyway, so congrats to Salty Croissant on pushing that 485X2 to, well, for I'm guessing further than anybody else before, or his CPU is just carrying him super hard. Okay, yeah, his CPU, yeah, actually compared to an i7 930, that chip is carrying him really hard. But hey, like it's still modified, so it's cool. Like I want to get my hands on one of these. So I still think this is just a cool score because it's a cool card. And chilled water cooling, vault modded and everything. Needs caps though. Needs cap mods and actually a power bridge on this would be a nightmare. Yeah, doing a power bridge on this just looks so not fun. Like look at that capacitor arrangement behind the core. You don't want to be doing that. Anyway, awesome score. Congrats to Salty on that. And let's move on to the next score, which is Chipsy's 3D Mark Firestrike Extreme. He took my first place. So, Radeon R9 270X at 1330 core, 1680 on the memory. He got exactly the same GPU score I did. I am very annoyed by this. Actually, not really. It just means, like, I just have another excuse to rebench my 270X. These things are awesome. 270X is great cards. Love the things. Scale with voltage, don't run very hot. What more could you ask for? Do crazy clocks even on air cooling. So yeah, and Gypsy wasn't... Did I post a system picture? I did post a system picture. Yeah, also I have a Sapphire Toxic. So... If you didn't know, I'm a massive Sapphire fanboy, just because I think they just make cool GPUs. So, Yeah, anyway, but he got 4452 GPU score. I'm getting 4452 GPU score. Um, oh, I guess he's running memory timing strap then as well because I am. Like just from the BIOS right there, you can tell I'm running a modified memory strap. Which is why I do that. So that it's not like hard to figure out. It's like, is that a stock regular BIOS or a modded BIOS? No, modded. But the thing is, Chipsy over here is running phase change on his 5950X, whereas I was on water cool, like was on an AIO, and so he's getting like significantly more physics score and beat my combined by 2 points, which means yeah, he got first place. So what I'm gonna go do is I'm gonna dig like I actually have another R9 270X. Maybe that one clocks higher. So yeah, I need to just rebench my 270Xs and run at like 1350 core instead of 1330 core, and hopefully beat him. Um, Actually, what I really want to do is run my 270Xs Sub-Zero someday. It's just I have so much stuff I want to run Sub-Zero, and a lot of the more modern stuff chugs LN2. So then it's just like there's nothing left over for the lower power stuff like this. I guess I could also like there's also the option of dry ice, but dry ice is just isn't like for me it really isn't cost effective compared to the liquid nitrogen. So um yeah, kind of weird. I guess I could water cool the card. Did he water? No, he's on the stock air cooler as well. Yeah, the thing is, these if you push 270X's Sub-Zero, they'll like on dry ice. I'd really expect these cards to be hitting over 1500, especially cards that are doing like 1330 on air cooling. On dry ice, they should be doing well over 1500. Um, so yeah, that would be cool. Um, Anyway, congrats to Chipsy on that single stage phase change on that 5950X. And yeah, congrats to him on beating my score by 5 points. And see, this is what justifies cap modding a GPU. If I had run 10 more, like if I could run 10 more megahertz core clock because of some extra capacitors, I'd have the top score for this benchmark. That's why I do all the like yeah. It's not very frequent that you see a gap just this small, but it's cool when you do. Um, anyway, so congrats to Chipsy on that score, and let's move on to the next score. AKM's Unigen Heaven Basic on the GTX 770. Yeah, water cooled 11900K doing 5.5 gigahertz, 4 cores, 4 threads, because Unigen Heaven only needs 4 cores and 4 threads. But when you're pushing really high FPS in it, which I'm not sure that this is high enough to justify that 5.5 gigahertz, but it might be. Because this is the DirectX 9 version of the benchmark, not the DirectX 11 version. And okay, no, 6,900 points, that kind of justifies the 5.5 gigahertz 11900K. Because this runs at very high FPS, like 6,000. Once you start hitting like 7,000 points, it starts CPU bottlenecking and also memory bottlenecking, which is why we're looking at what is that? That's 4533, 14, 13, 13, 28. So that's going to be Gear 2, Northbridge at 4.6 gigahertz. GTX 772 running 1400 megahertz on the core, 2 gigahertz on the memory. So yeah, solid overclock on the card, water cooling on everything. Big fan on the VRM. Yeah, cool score to see. I can't remember what my 770 does right now off the top of my head, but this is something I could run this like I should check this benchmark out. I'm pretty sure at least one of my GTX 770s can do 1400 plus, and if they can't, I'm just gonna shove more voltage in them. Um, right? That's what we have alt mods for. But yeah, just this like cool score, right? Water cooled CPU. I really pushing that CPU at 5.5 gigahertz. I'm not sure I'm. Well, it's only 4 cores and 4 threads, so I guess I didn't check the voltage. Yeah, okay, with 1.6 volts, totally doable. So yeah, cool score from AKM here with the GTX 770. And like I wasn't even aware that this was like a benchmark you could run or that was worth running, right? But apparently it is. So hopefully we'll get some more action in this category for the GTX 770. I'm thinking like I already have NVIDIA drivers on that OS that like my new burner OS is on NVIDIA drivers. So um, yeah, I could totally go for this. Um, that that might be a live stream idea. Try to see how far I can get in Unigine Heaven Basic. I'm not sure if I'm gonna bother not like taking off the air cooler off of my GTX 770 because I can't remember what clocks it hits with the air cooler. Probably not high enough. Maybe I should just zip tie an AIO to it or something. That might be a good idea. Anyway, congratulations to AKM on the Unigine Heaven Basic score. And like that like for 770, that's high. And the 1400 core, yeah, like the 1400 core on a GTX 770, that's pretty high core clock. So yeah, cool score. Also, Unigine Heaven Basic is actually a pretty long benchmark, so the thermal load is actually important. Like Firestrike, you can run kind of surprisingly high clocks because it's so short. Unigine Heaven is 4 minutes, so it's one of those benchmarks really pushing my patience. But it is a benchmark I enjoy because you don't need a good CPU. There's no, well, you don't need like an HEDT CPU. You don't need a 16 core because there isn't a 60 like a 32 thread physics test. You just need a 4 core. You just need a strong quad core, and you can get solid Unigine Heaven scores. So yeah, cool score from AKM here. Let's move on to the next one, which is White Shark's 3D Mark Vantage performance with two GTX 980 Ti's. I love dual GPU setups. Also, this is just an interesting card. That's the well, he has a Kingpin Edition 980 Ti, a working Kingpin Edition 980 Ti, which is rare because those things die like the 980 Ti's hate existing, and the Kingpin Edition ones for some reason also have a pretty high failure rate. Um, like I've seen a lot of dead Kingpin Editions, not a lot of working ones. In fact, I have two dead ones and one that I recently repaired, like right now. Um, Within my yeah, so that's great. But White Shark has a working one, so hopefully it doesn't hopefully it keeps working. Because yeah, like 980 Ti's are one of those GPUs that honestly I'd be scared to run them just because they're 980 Ti's. At least it's not a reference card. The reference cards like to burn themselves up, but the KPEs just sort of, well, the issue is it's the core itself just doesn't really seem to like holding together very long. So anyway, CPU on LN2 because this is Vantage, and well, what he's doing here is very like the thing is two 980 Ti's. Vantage is an old benchmark, so two 980 Ti's produce tons of FPS, and so the GPU score is going to be plenty high enough even with the cards just on air cooling. Though he has overclocked them a bit, right? Memory at 2.05 gigahertz and 12. I don't know what actual clocks that is because NVIDIA GPUs and boost algorithm, but probably pushing 1400-ish then boost because yeah, Maxwell is when the boost algorithm got really weird. Like Kepler cards were pretty simple, but once you get to Maxwell, the boost is all over the place. But yeah, the idea is very simple. A 5.6 gigahertz 5950X gives you an absolutely massive CPU score in Vantage, and then combined with a 100,000 point GPU score, it gives you a massive overall, and the ranking is based on the overall score. So yeah, White Shark is now in first place, but whoa, he did not beat the. I guess somebody else had the same idea, but with a 7980XE, of course. Yeah. Interesting that this. Oh, I guess these GPUs went a bit further because White Shark's running a 980 Ti KPE, and then the other card he's running is it's some weird colorful. Like I think it's a colorful Kuden, or I can't remember what it is. Has a really funky VRM on it with like trash power stages, like lots of really nice capacitors and then trash power stages. It's really interesting to see that. Like Zotac does the same thing where you just have there's a lot of Zotac cards where you have like a really arguably brute force style output filter and then just like the cheapest power stages they could find. lots of them. So massive, like really high phase count. Oh, I remember which card this is. This is the one with the 12 phase, like the ancient 12 phase controller, where it's like, why is this on a 980 Ti? Yeah, so that's just a cool card. Not a card that you'd necessarily want for like competitive overclocking, just because I don't think it's actually that great. Like it's not on par with like a 980, like a Kingpin edition or a Matrix or a Hall of Fame or something like that. But an interesting card, just in terms of just cool VRM design. You can have an interesting VRM without it actually being good. There's a difference between the two. Because also I think this is one of those cards that actually has the VRM laid out as two. Like the VRM layout on this thing is pretty unique. I'm pretty sure I did a PCB breakdown of this card because I think White Shark sent me pictures of this. So if I can remember to find that video, I'll try link that in the description. But yeah, just cool score. Like I'm a huge fan of multi-GPU setup. So even if ultimately this is primarily about that 5950X doing almost 140,000 points on the CPU portion of the test, there's two 980 Ti's in the system, and that counts as a multi-GPU setup in my book. And this is run on a Gigabyte X570 Aorus Master. Yeah, X570 Aorus Master motherboard, 3800, actually just 3600 1414. He's really chilling on the memory. Oh, right, LN2 CPU. You can't necessarily run as aggressive memory settings. Dual rank, though. Right, you can see the 4 memory sticks there, being very aesthetically arranged. So yeah, cool score from White Shark. Let's move on to the next score, which is Tante K the. I've butchered that. I have no idea how to pronounce that. I don't know what it's made up, but anyway. 3D Mark Vantage performance score with a Radeon RX Vega 56, 1700 megahertz on the core, 900 megahertz on the memory. So that's probably a Hynix card, because if it was a Samsung card, you could flash a Vega 64 BIOS on it, and you should be able to run like 1100 on the memory, if I remember my no 1200. Was it 1100 or 1200 where the Samsung memory chips walled? I can't remember right now. But anyway, just a cool score because, we've got a 5800X doing 90,000 points CPU score. Yeah, GPU pushed to almost 80,000 points. Like he's pushing that card quite hard, right? Like 1700. I can't remember if Vega boosts above that or around that. It's been a while since I've run a Vega. Yeah, kind of a mild memory overclock. He really should put a Vega 64 BIOS on it. If it's a reference card, he should put a Vega 64 BIOS on it. B550 Aorus Elite motherboard. That's the memory settings. 3600, 1414. Yeah, I mean, it's Vantage. You don't need to push it that hard. And is he seriously running PBO on that CPU? That's PBO. Like he bet like because that's like base, like this has got to be PBO, right? Or is he actually running it at stock? Please don't tell me it's actually running stock CPU. Like that is way too much CPU score for a stock CPU in my opinion. I mean, if the 5900 if the 5800X actually produces that much CPU score at stock clocks, that's insane. That's got to be like PBO or something. That can't be stock. Like that's a multi-core. Though the chip does come with like 105. It does come with the 144 watt PPT. So I guess you wouldn't really need PBO because PBO just gives you more power limit. Which this thing is probably the 5800X is like the least power limited Ryzen CPU there is, because it's only 8 cores, but it has the same power limit as the 12 core and the 16 core. So I guess you could get away with a stock 5800X. That's really surprising. Also, having the dynamic clocks active should help a little bit with the FPS, like the GPU tests, because yeah, when you're running 200 plus FPS, you start hitting CPU bottlenecks. So, yeah, interesting score. But definitely, I think if it's not on is actually GPUZ should tell us. Yeah, he's on Hynix. Yeah, okay, don't flash the BIOS. Apparently, like I've not had a Hynix card myself, but I've heard that they die if you use the Vega 64 Samsung BIOS on them. So don't do that. Bad idea. Anyway, then we've got another, but still, congrats to, I'm not going to try to pronounce that, on the first place with the Vega 56. Let's move on to John Hexane's W Prime 32 million on 2 Intel Xeon E5410s. And these are overclocked. These are Xeons, but these are the old Xeons that you could overclock by 18%, apparently. Green PCB server motherboard. Running, yeah, like this is just going to be a FSB overclock. Two quad-core CPUs, so 8 cores total, right? Yeah, 8 cores total. LGA 771, one of those platforms I don't know anything about. Memory running, what? Okay, I have no idea what is going on. That's DDR2 8th? Yeah, so that's going to be DDR2 800 at 555 15. I don't know if that's good. I feel like that's bad. That sounds bad. But I don't know anything about DDR2, so yeah, and then a Supermicro X7DB8 motherboard. So unfortunately I don't know anything about this. I just thought, like, I just saw this score and this system and I was like, cool, dual CPU, and actually like overclockable dual CPU and ancient, which just makes it cool too. So yeah, first place on the dual E5410 rankings, and there's actually like a surprising number of surprising amount of competition here. And apparently he's one of like the few people to actually manage to overclock the CPU or something. Or I have no idea what's going on with this ranking. Weird ranking, but oh, I guess I should have mentioned W Prime 32 million, super short multi-core benchmark, pretty hot, like it actually like pretty heavy, but really really short. So that's kind of like, this is one of the benchmarks I really like, and also kind of a weird benchmark where it's super dependent on like having the OS set up properly, and there's like weird tweaks for it. But I just like the fact that it's a short one and it's multi-threaded. So anyway, congrats to John Hexane on the W Prime 32 million top score for the for dual E5410 Xeons. And let's take a look at the last score, which is Alex Hempel's 3D Mark 11 performance with an HD 6990. And this is just another case of I love dual GPUs, like multi GPU and dual core GPUs. Like, I just love multiple GPUs, and this is multiple GPUs as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, GPUs on water cooling, CPUs on water cooling, CPU doing 10900K doing 5.4 gigahertz. Just 4000 15 15 15 on the memory, so it's kind of like, that's like daily settings. But this is well, no, 3D Mark 11 is one of the ones where you can actually get a significant improvement in the physics score from like dialing in your memory settings. But Alex evidently didn't need it because, you know, fastest 6990 to ever be posted to HWbot. 1030 on the core, 1338 on the memory. Doesn't So big core overclock, not much on the memory. I don't know much about these cards. I do have a 6990. I've like checked that it works and not done anything else with it. Yeah. And I have it with the big Accelero like Arctic air cooler. So yeah, but I need to get a like the interest. I'm surprised he's able to run this now that I think of it. Because the biggest problem with a lot of these old AMD GPUs is like you stick them into modern, or really just old dual core GPUs like this, is you stick them into a modern system and they don't boot. Which actually reminds me, there was that 485 score. Who ran it? Oh, this one. Wait, the Crosshair Impact ran that? I guess Asus is just better about actually supporting these ancient dual core cards than a lot of the other vendors, because yeah, my experience with some of the old GPUs is like you put them in a motherboard and then the motherboard's just like, I do not understand what a PLX chip is. I refuse to turn this on. And actually what gets weirder is like, especially the Nvidia ones don't even use a PLX chip. They use like a Nvidia bridge, like Nvidia PCIe switch, which makes it even worse because some motherboards will initialize the like AMD cards. They will not initialize the Nvidia ones. I guess maybe it might just be the AMD ones are like more compatible then. Yeah, anyway, cool score, right? CPU, like, he's really pushing that CPU. Like, that physics test is actually quite hot. This one's hard. Like, this is a harder physics test to pass than what, like, Firestrike does. Um, so, yeah. Also, he's really pushing that Encore at 5.1 gigahertz. Yeah, well, not even that much. That's a good chip. That's a good chip right there. 5.4 at 1.4 and 5.1. Like, yeah, that's a good chip he has. And then push the GPU to beat MLLR, KLLR, so Miller, who ran better clocks on the GPU, but 8700K for the CPU. So, yeah, Alex is really, well, is he? GPU score. Similar GPU scores, but yeah, that physics score definitely definitely is helping quite a bit. And then also, well, and losing combined, which is interesting. That is very interesting that Miller has a higher combined score. Because I'd assume that would be CPU limited, which the 10900K should be better for that. Anyway, that's the last score for this roundup, and oh my god, this one's so long. But there's been a lot of epic scores. Like, I'm not gonna reject, like, you know, bunch of really cool dual GPU stuff and multi GPU stuff, and then also like people beating my scores by 5 points because of their faster CPU. Yeah, so congratulations to Alex on the 6990 score, and that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. If you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a Patreon. There's a link to that down in the description below. There's also the HOC Teespring store where you can pick up shirts, stickers, posters, you know, the usual YouTuber merch. And it would be much appreciated if you check either of the, you know, Patreon or Teespring links out, because they help out immensely with running the channel. So, yeah, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.